Welcome everyone with Informed with your hosts Brian and Dimitri. Today we have with us someone who pretty much doesn't need an introduction, but hey, why don't we give him one anyway? Carl Sargon of Akkad Benjamin is a popular independent vlogger with over 900,000 subscribers and counting. It's probably going up at this very second. A skeptic of ideologies, both theological and political, his channel is dedicated to rational arguments backed by evidence. Sometimes a polemicist, at other times soft-spoken, Carl Benjamin of Akkad has created a considerable amount of content regarding skeptical thought. Carl, how does it feel to be the official mascot of UKIP? Go.
It could be worse, to be honest. You know, honestly, I figure that the Nazi pug is actually the official mascot of Europe. I'm more like a cheerleader. You know,
that's hilarious. The pug that actually would make a funny mascot. Because Dankula's in there too, and you guys are kind of tag teaming that.
Yeah. It's it's doing what we can to try and save free speech in my country.
Well, is this the first time that we've seen a YouTuber? I mean, YouTube is relatively recent. This is the first time a YouTuber has really kind of waded into the political arena. I don't know of anyone else.
I can't think of anyone.
Well, in specific to like free speech in your country, I think what is the law, the copyright law that went through, that was passed by the EU, which you guys are still subject to. You know, there was some talk that YouTube put out that we might have to censor some content from content creators in the EU, which would include you right now. Do we know anything more about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's exactly as you say. So what the EU is a giant behemoth that's run by people who don't understand the internet. But they do understand that Silicon Valley has lots of money, and a lot of their money is being generated from within Europe. And so they're looking for ways of trying to siphon money from Silicon Valley back to Europe. And one of the ways that they're doing this is through what I personally consider to be draconian levels of sort of copyright enforcement. So they completely bypass the legal concept of fair use. So basically, if you were to upload anything to a social media network that was based on copyrighted material, even if it's being remixed, used for parody, commentary, all of the other things that within English-speaking countries is covered in fair use, and probably on the continent of Europe as well, the social media platform would be required to have an algorithm that scanned everything that you uploaded, and if it matched any kind of copyrighted content, then it would have to censor that content, because that would obviously be, in their opinion, an infringement of the rights of the copyright holder, whether it is or is not an infringement of these rights, because obviously an algorithm isn't going to be able to tell context and satire and commentary and things like this. And so it puts the entire continent under a kind of blanket level of censorship for, like, I mean, if you uploaded a GIF to Facebook as a reaction of like Aladdin or something, Jafar or something like that, that would be considered by an algorithm copyright content because it was made by Disney, and therefore it would have to be removed to stay in line with EU regulations. And
why don't European companies just make their own conglomerates, and then you guys would be great?
Well, that's kind of what they want to do, really. But I guess the problem is Silicon Valley's got a kind of deforming effect, because it's kind of like a black hole for this kind of talent, and they suck in a disproportionate number of them, and it's and then when you've got like the area becomes kind of self-perpetuating because of all the similar thinking people in the same area. But
there's precedent for it too, right? I think in Germany, so it's a German law, not an EU law, that Facebook and other social media companies are required to scan for hate speech. And if they don't find it within 24 hours, they can be liable. So it forces like the companies to do the work to making algorithms cannot be cheap and easy.
No, it's a massive barrier to entry. I mean, it's the sort of thing that's only possible for companies in Silicon Valley, because there is the required level of expertise, money, and technology to be able to actually make this. Because I mean, you need a giant data bank with which to match everything against. I mean, that in and of itself is a huge financial commitment and technological commitment. Any kind of entrepreneurial startup who want to, the next Twitter or Facebook, where they're at the moment, like Minds.com, they're putting together their site. That won't be possible in Europe.
Correct.
They'll have to operate outside of Europe.
What I'm hearing, Sargon, is that it's just a matter of time before you move to an actually free country. So just tell us.
Well,
what
let me. No. Listen, let's segue into Brexit from that, because look, we are going to be an actually free country, at least slightly more than we are. On the 29th of March, because it looks like we're going to leave the European Union without a deal, not because they want to leave without a deal, but because they're not capable of actually finding a deal that the European Union itself will agree to. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we get to avoid Article 13 and the Copyright Directive, and just on the incompetence of our government alone.
Well, then you could leave without a deal. They would have to renegotiate all kinds of trade deals then after.
Yeah, they would. Yeah.
Okay, then do that. I thought somehow you guys couldn't leave, or it'd be chaos or bedlam of some sort. Northern Ireland is fucked, Gibraltar's fucked. There's all these places.
It could hurt the markets, right? It could hurt markets that need those existing trade deals. It could step them up for a little.
I mean, this is the general fear-mongering. So there's no question that if we were to leave without a deal, we would then have to revert to World Trade Organization terms for international trade. Which is good and bad in different ways. We would presumably have to renegotiate in very short order a bunch of trade deals between the UK and Germany, France, and Ireland, other major trading partners on the continent. And you would think that the threat of us not doing this would be something that the European Union would take very seriously. But because our political class is incredibly weak, and there's a kind of pathology that's gripping Westminster at the moment that is, we can't leave with no deal because that will cost people jobs. And it's like, okay, but people voted to leave on no uncertain terms, and it was very clear. It was leave the European Union, leave the customs market, leave the European Court of Human Rights jurisdiction, make sure that Britain is an independent sovereign country and we are ruled from within Britain.
Incredibly close vote. I mean, if they're worried about people losing jobs, to be fair, if it's essentially 50-50, which was what it was, they need to do right by their constituency, I'm sure.
Sure, but there's no getting around the fact that if the European Union isn't prepared to play ball, and if they're not prepared to actually come to a reasonable deal that suits both parties, then we've got no choice but to leave, and there is going to be some kind of disruption. But the thing is, it's really hard to say what kind of disruption there's going to be, because, the head of the World Trade Organization has said, well, there'll be an initial disruption, but it won't be the end of the world. Okay, I can accept that. You've got the ex-head of the Bank of England, who from the start was like, well, we should just take a no deal now, pay them nothing, because one of the things that they're trying to get out of us is £39 billion, which is probably something like $50 billion, And if we don't get a deal with them, then we don't have to pay that, and we can start trading with other nations outside of the European Union.
Here's what, why can't an easy fix would be to sell to a country that does have a deal with the European Union for whatever widgets that the primary market is in the EU. Sell to a country that they sell it there. Okay, it takes an extra step, but boom, you're done. I mean, until you've got a deal that would be an easy thoroughfare, it seems like it costs a little more.
Can you break down?
I mean, why don't they do that?
Well, I'm not sure why they don't do that. I have a feeling that that's a question that has so many different threads that would tie in. It would take me a long time to unpick them all and trace them all back. But to be honest with you, it's not all negative. It's actually, it's not all negative for Britain. Sorry, I should say, because there are many countries outside of the European Union that will trade with us goods that are cheaper that we get from inside the EU, because of these treaties that we have, and because of the EU is essentially a protectionist bloc for the countries within it. It's very protectionist for those countries, and it's got very strong tariffs coming for things coming into the European Union that aren't already agreed via trade deals. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I think it's about preserving a certain kind of order. I don't think it's about necessarily doing the right thing, but basically Britain stands to gain in many ways. We've got to go kind of a bit arch capitalist with it. What we'll need to do is start slashing corporate taxes, making sure that we're offering essentially anyone who wants to trade with us very low tariff trade to make sure that we're a competitive market. But honestly, we could I mean, one of the things that the Labour Party, the sort of like socialist party of the country, is saying that they don't want is for us to become an offshore tax haven. And I'm just thinking, well, they're not exactly poor places, tax havens, are they?
You do want to be a tax haven.
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
Look at Ireland, Jesus.
Yeah, I know. And that's one of the things that they're complaining about is like, they're saying, well, Google, for example, I get paid from Google Ireland because their corporate tax rate is more competitive than ours. And it's like, well, why don't we outcompete the European Union then? We can encourage all sorts of things to come here.
Carl, without putting you on the spot, which I obviously am, for someone like myself, I don't know, and this is I think the last thing we want to say on this Brexit thing, because it's Brexit. What's like the 3, 4, however many high-level bullet points of why Europe doesn't want to do this deal? Like, what is the problem they have? Besides, you just mentioned one, they want like $40 billion.
Yeah, okay. So the money's probably the main problem. The German finance minister has repeatedly warned that it's going to be very, very bad for Europe if they don't get the 39 billion, because Britain pays something like 10 billion a year or something, 8 billion a year to the European Union. We're the second biggest net contributor, and the number of net contributors in the European Union is low. It's 28 countries, and I think only about 7 or 8 of them are net contributors, or 9 or 10 maybe. It's the minority that are net contributors, and Britain, the second largest, is leaving. And the knock-on effect of this is that Ireland's economy, if we get no deal, Ireland's economy is so closely tied to Britain's economy that the Irish finance minister has said that they're essentially going to have to start appealing to the European Union for subsidies to maintain various industries. But that will change Ireland from being a net contributor into a net debtor, a net receiver from the European Union, which means that Brexit is causing at least 2 of the net contributors to be knocked out of the system. And this will undoubtedly have further knock-on effects. And what that means is essentially the French, German, Italian, and Dutch public are going to have to start picking up the bill that Britain's essentially leaving the European Union with by not giving them the money. Now, I don't think that's going to be very well accepted in France, where they're still having every weekend mass protests over fuel tax rises. Well, what started over fuel tax rises and has gone into a kind of general anti-administration position. I don't think they're going to be very happy about raising their taxes to pay for the EU. And I very much doubt the Italians will even listen to any kind of request. I think Salvini will laugh them out of the room. So, I mean, the European Union is putting itself in a pretty bad position here. And the second problem is that the European Union, before Brexit, the desire for European federalization was always kind of low key. It was always the sort of fringe Brexiteers who'd be yelling from in the distance, oh, they're trying to create a United States of Europe, a federal European superstate that they can use to dominate the rest of the continent. And that was obviously true, but it sounded hysterical, and the European Union was always a bit more low-key than that. But recently, I can't remember which French, it was a member of the French government, basically echoed Guy Verhofstadt, one of the chief Brexit negotiators for the European Union's opinion, where he called for an empire, specifically using the word empire of the good. And then a French politician in the government said very much the same thing. They want an empire of Europe in order to compete with the United States and China and Russia, of course.
Even talk about an EU army.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So again, for years,
I would be saying the exact same thing if I was there. I don't want to be Slovenia or some of these small bullshit countries that can't have any say in anything. I would be saying the same thing.
Yeah, you'd want to get out as quickly as you can. But this is the thing.
I'd want to be part of
you'd want really?
I'd want to be the Georgia of Georgia's a shitty state, right?
I don't know.
From Georgia, sorry. Or whatever state, doesn't matter. But we're a confederated republic, right?
Yeah, of course.
If I were a small country in Europe, I'd want to be part of a larger, I'd want to be a big dick player on the world stage.
Yeah, the thing is, it would be. I mean, I don't think they would consider themselves to be big players, and I think that a lot of countries that have gone into the European Union in the past 20 years have. There's an aspect of regret there. One of the reasons that most of the countries aren't net payers to the European Union. It's because most of them were poor. And the idea was for basically Western Europe to siphon money to these places to build them up so they could become productive. And don't remember, that has happened. Obviously,
Poland.
the French, German, and British taxpayers have given a lot of money to Europe, and Europe has spent a lot of money on Eastern and Southern Europe. But the thing is, what Greece learned is that you don't have a voice. What this is a giant corporate bloc that's being run by France and Germany.
Mhm.
And recently, France and Germany essentially got married. I don't really know how to put it. Like Angela Merkel and Macron went and had a nice ceremony where they kissed and held hands and wore rings or something and pledged the undying love of France to Germany and Germany to France. I'm obviously paraphrasing hyperbolically there, but essentially that's what they were trying to put across. And then a few weeks ago, or a couple of months ago now, they did officially announce the EU army. Now this was just flatly denied for years leading up to the Brexit referendum, and then a report was leaked the day after. Shortly leading up, that was due to be released the day after the referendum about the EU announcement of its own army. And then about a month ago, Angela Merkel and Macron both announced that they'd love the idea of a European army, and Jean-Claude Juncker, the head of the Commission, said, well, yes, I would love to have an army. I'm so glad we're all in agreement. So there will definitely be a European army. It will definitely become a federated states of Europe if it survives long enough, which is honestly in question, because there's so much unrest in Europe at the moment, and they're having such financial problems. No one wants to talk about the Greek crisis anymore. No one talks about it because there's no real solution. Greece will be effectively permanently crippled by their use of the euro, because they can never make their economy as competitive as France and Germany, and without having any ability to manipulate their own currency. I was reading up on this, and loads of economists were like, look, what Greece basically needs to do, drop the euro, readopt the drachma, about half the value of the euro, to encourage investment into their country. And then they can start rebuilding their economy. And that sounds great, except there is absolutely zero provision to leave the euro. You can't leave the euro, at least not legally through the usual mechanisms. And that's been set up deliberately. Once people join it, they don't want you leaving it, because they're trying to create a solidified European empire, a super state. So, I mean, and then you've got the case of like half of Europe is essentially in revolt against I guess you call it sort of progressive neoliberal consensus that the European Union as an institution operates under. I went there last year, and you can feel the weight of the conformity in the institution. You can see why people become like carbon copy, cookie cutter bureaucrats. It's very conformist there. And people who don't conform, I was there going to visit UKIP members, and people who don't conform obviously get completely marginalized. There's this natural inbuilt bias towards the system. And it's because the MEPs, despite having less power than national politicians, get paid more than national politicians. I mean, almost everyone in the country will be able to tell you who their local MP is, but no one will be able to tell you who their MEP is.
Point to a counterexample. So I'll give you. Sorry, Brian. I want you to get in here too. Look at Russia. Russia's obviously not part of the EU. Not going to happen. Not going to happen anytime soon. Maybe ever.
Yeah.
They have their own currency. Doing great. The ruble is fucking off the charts, right?
Is it? I didn't know.
No, it's not. That's obvious.
I was going to say it's not what I was expecting.
It's a shit country. I'm from there. I would know. I was just there in August. But hey, I have a lot of pride for where I'm born. Regardless, no one's investing, and if people tell you they're investing in Russia, they're not. So this argument that if you have an independent country, that all this money is going to flow in. And granted, some of this is tied up with the fact that Putin's a dick, but beyond that, the fact that a Greece could somehow magically, leave and then attract all these investment dollars and then become a juggernaut of its own accord. I don't know of an example where that has happened of a country that's autonomous, that's escaped the EU fucking magnetic force. And if you know of one, that'd be great to bring up. But at this point, I think it's just a theory of yours.
Well, it is, of course, just a theory, because Britain are the first country to leave the European Union.
We'll see if it's good or fucked.
Well, yeah, it depends on your perspective. But yeah, so I mean, I mean, I can imagine that there are a lot of reasons that Russia is not as competitive economically. I'm not an expert on the Russian economy, though. I'm not an expert on any economy, but I don't know anything about the Russian economy, really.
It's corrupt.
I can bet. I can bet. Yeah, that's exactly what I would expect. And to be honest with you, there are a lot of places like I imagine the Greek economy isn't much less corrupt. I mean, one of the problems they have in Greece is people that like paying for pensions is a real problem because people tax evade all the time and they retire at like 55 and they expect a pension at that age. And so it's just like, yeah, exactly. You've got a huge amount of tax evasion and loads of people retaring young and trying to draw a pension. It's no wonder Greece is bankrupt.
Did
You know,
see
it's
this,
absolutely
did
no
you
wonder.
see this thing about Greece where this is how they proved that they were doing tax. This is not one of the only ways, but they have some sort of tax you have to pay for pools, like a
Right.
swimming pool. And then so they have a stat that's like 1 out of 10, whatever the fuck, pays this tax. And then they did a flyover and like every other house has a pool or something. And they're like, well, this is Greece. Obviously, no.
Yeah.
Well, right.
Yeah.
You don't finish your pool or something, right? You don't have to pay
Oh,
taxes
yeah,
on your
that's
second
true, that's
story if
true.
you don't finish it. So, or you don't have to pay project
It's
taxes.
still
So every
getting
house is
built.
still under construction. Yeah, it's absurd. But is there any truth or is there any legal way for there to be like a second referendum, like a revote? People did this, during the 2000 election in the United States. They're like, well, Florida needs to revote. There's no law to say a revote. What's it like in Britain?
So I don't believe there is a legal avenue to have a second referendum before March the 29th, which is the due date for us to leave. I read an article, I think it was in Bloomberg the other day, that was breaking down 3 arguments, as to why legally it's just not going to happen. And honestly, I'm really glad about it because we are currently the common term that's being used to describe this at the moment is that Britain has a Remain Parliament in a Leave country, and that's broadly the case. I mean, like the Guardian had to talk about a poll that was the Guardian's a far left outlet for anyone who's not aware. They're very pro Remain. But they had to talk about a poll that went around the other day because, I mean, people keep polling the public saying, "Oh, what do you want? What do you want?" And now the most popular position in the entire country is just to leave without a deal. It's not. People know that there's going to be trouble. People know there's going to be trouble. Obviously, you can't do something this titanic and not have disruptions and job losses, and. But I mean, it really is insulting, I feel, to myself and just the British public in general, I would imagine, to act like they don't know what it's like to lose a job. I mean, we've all lost jobs. We know that it's rough when you make seismic political decisions like this. We know. But we're voting on a point of principle, and it is right for us to be a sovereign nation. It is right for us to have decisions made within our own borders by our own elected politicians. I mean, literally, it comes down to the very fucking mantra that made your country: no taxation without representation, right? I am not represented on the European Commission. I can't vote to get rid of these people, and there is literally nothing I could ever do to change any of their minds. And it's like, well, then I have to. This is not democratic, and so for then, we have the referendum. UKIP essentially caused the referendum to happen because they just kept gaining in the polls because this is a popular sentiment around the country. I mean, a lot of people, they don't express it in these terms, but they know that there's something wrong. With the European Union. And they know it's too remote. They know that they have no control over these people, and yet they've got to give them money. And they know that the decisions that affect our country should be made in our country. So people wanted to leave. And now they're like, well, we should have a second referendum. It's like, well, if you thought that we weren't happy the first time, like I feel it would be completely anti-democratic. And
Sargon, last point on this. I just wanted to give you some props. You did that man on the street thing where you went out, you interviewed a bunch of people, and good for you for not cutting that because you had some hard ass. You had some very knowledgeable people that were throwing facts in your face, and I don't know how well you grade yourself on how you did, but when I see some of these guys like Fleckus and fucking Nuance Bro and all these guys who interview people, I don't know if they're cutting out the examples where they're getting hard comments, questions. You clearly didn't do that, so Mazel Tov, brother, for hanging in there, taking the punches, and then I think you did a follow up after that, right? Fact checking everything they said.
No, I didn't. I didn't. I didn't do a fact check of that. the thing is, right, the thing is, a lot of what's being said is it's the distinction between what is and ought. You know, for example, there's no point telling me as I'm a Brexiteer, is what they call us. So I'm voting in principle for sovereignty. I don't really care the economic damage it does. I am of the opinion that we are strong enough to be able to say, look, whatever the problems that are caused, we'll handle them. I mean, we handled the Nazis. We can handle Brexit. You know, if you know, it'll be rough. We might have to make some sacrifices. We'll make do. We'll muddle through. We'll figure it out.
I mean, Russia handled the Nazis, but let's not pick hairs.
Well, everyone handled the Nazis, really, didn't they?
I mean, most, but that's.
But anyway, but the point is we're made of sterner stuff. And so saying, well, I mean, there'll be a 5% hit to GDP. It's like, okay, there'll be a 5% hit to GDP. And then we'll make whatever decisions we can make to try and mitigate that and reverse that as we come out of the European Union, won't we? You know, we'll pray that we've elected sensible statesmen, I suppose, which is probably optimistic. But the point is, you know, it doesn't really affect my decision. And honestly, in the same, this is a political, like, this is a way of viewing politics that honestly more people need to do. I mean, like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, no matter what you think of her, that's
going to be a great segment after this, by the way. That's where we'll transition to. Go ahead.
Yeah, she actually made this point when she said, you know, the difference between morally correct and factually correct. She obviously was saying it wrong. You know, obviously being factually correct is the most important thing. But if you're acting on a point of principle, then, you know, you can accept some things as necessary sacrifices. And that's basically my opinion with Brexit.
Right. So what's been making news over here, because it seems like Brexit's the big thing there.
We have a perfect
segue. There's two things. I mean, we'll transition to the one that Demo does, but I had a different transition.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I trust you, baby.
So what I think is making like the biggest news, but we'll cut to the politics here, is like Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who I think is like this idealist. Like she talks about, I think she was in either a university or some theater where she was talking, and she says, well, millennials, like they understand like the world's not going to be here in 12 years after global warming. And I thought, I've not talked to a millennial that has said that. Like, I mean, maybe that's hyperbole, but it's interesting how that 12 years actually does fit her green energy plan, of which, you know,
consistency marks, high marks for consistency.
Right. But is this what the EU does too? Is that this absurd idealism, but it doesn't make any practical sense. Like, you know, we want to help and they take in too many refugees. And same way with AOC, I just like, you can't say my feelings are good, but my facts suck. I mean, you just can't do it.
One thing that's I think it's worth clarifying about her statement. I'm a critic of hers, obviously, and I think she's been unfairly characterized with the 12-year statement. What I think she meant, I'm not sure, maybe she didn't articulate this well, but what I think she meant was we've got 12 years before we can't take certain steps that will actually be sure to reduce climate change. And so that's what I think she was trying to say. Okay. Not the world won't be here in 12 years.
That would be interesting. If are there leading scientists that are saying that
I have no idea. I never get into the climate change debate. I just don't care about it. There is too much else for me to worry about than to get into that as a subject. But I think that's what she was trying to say. Sorry, what was the question about her again? Sorry.
But she's a bit of a media darling here. At least that's what Dave Rubin says. I think she's been on all the major programs. She did take a big dodge at the Women's March, where so the DNC quietly pulls their sponsorship based on like anti-Semitic statements. You know, the leaders being far too close with Farrakhan. But then if she was interviewed and the reporter asked her, and she says, you know, I'm very, very concerned about anti-Semitism. Donald Trump has been pushed and completely says that it's all the right. And I thought either that is a weak dodge or.
Wait, I'm confused. She was at the march.
She was at the march.
That's the question is, how does she get a pass? Because she's taking a direct she's doing a fucking jabbing right at the DNC, center.
But if we're taking a jab at her, you have to take a jab sort of at all the attendees. And I convinced that a lot of attendees don't even know who Linda Sarsour is. They're just going because they want either a party or they feel like, yay, women's rights. So I mean, it's unfair to convict attendance. I think, but
Agreed.
I think the dodge, like to sit there and say that anti-Semitism was all pushed by Trump and that doesn't exist on the left and in the Women's March when there's huge evidence that it does, I thought was just a pretty weak dodge by him.
I don't think you could accuse Donald Trump in any way of being an anti-Semite. I mean, he seems to be very pro-Israel, very pro
move the capital to Jerusalem. There's no fucking way you can say he's
I know, right? And I'm so like, and he's got Jewish members of his own family and things like this. So it's just like, I don't see. I mean, all she's doing is essentially playing tribe there. She's saying, "Oh, it's not our tribe, it's their tribe." In the era of Donald Trump, everything bad, emanates from Donald Trump downwards to us. You can't portray Trump as an anti-Semite.
I would agree. Now, if she would have said, say, the alt-right, which is anti-Semitic, that would be okay.
This is less about Trump. This is more about, I don't know. My Facebook is constantly filled with that Onion article about how Fox is releasing a 24-hour channel focused just on Alexandra and on AOC, which is hilarious. And I've had friends ask me, they're like, what is your guys, and I don't know why I'm lumped into this group, but it's like, what is the conservatives' obsession with AOC? And my only response to that was because of the identitarianism of the perceived far right and the Trump, the MAGA movement, what's potentially going to push the Democratic Party way the fuck left is going to be someone like her who is not only knows how to do the social media game like a goddamn champion, she's really good at it.
Yep.
She is not butt ugly. And I mean, she preaches all of the
she's got game.
Super left. Yeah, she's got game. So, yeah, they're trying to focus on the number one threat, not the fucking Nancy Pelosi's, who's the old guard.
But she's a freshman. She's a freshman rep, but she's been on like all the major news. But she's all the late night shows. She's on 60 Minutes. She's getting out. Like, what other freshman rep has done that? Like. Oh. So it's the Democratic Party. She's a celebrity within the left. That's why the right's focusing on her. If she wasn't popular in the left, the right would ignore her.
True.
Well, the thing is, her popularity in the left is because of how she provokes the right. That's if she wasn't so effective at triggering Ben Shapiro, then she would be a nobody. Because
stop catcalling.
Yeah. So okay. So yeah, exactly. I mean, that should have been an embarrassing, effectively career ender for her. I'm not going to debate you. You were effectively catcalling me. That is pathetic, absolutely pathetic. But they don't care. And so you can watch a lot of far left pundits, and they love Cortez and they love her. I mean, for example, the other day on the Young Turks network, not just their main channel, but a bunch of the other channels they have as well, they put out videos of them telling their audience why they like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And literally they were saying, well, she makes me feel really good. She's expressing my values in their most purest form. And I'm like, okay, but isn't that the same thing as an evangelical preacher doing it to a mega church? He expresses these Christian values in their most purest form in a way that really resonates with the audience, and they love him for it. And it's the same thing with TYT and I think a lot of other far leftists and Cortez. She's towing and she's promoting the radical left agenda very, very faithfully within the confines of working within the establishment, and they love her for it. This is going to make her a superstar.
If someone was going to pin you down and say, okay, is that hyperbole? What do you mean by agenda? What's the agenda?
Well, everyone has an agenda. Like, I mean, my agenda is to help get the UK out of Europe and to get a codified constitution to protect free speech. Everyone's got an agenda.
How do you define what the far left agenda is from the far or from just the moderate left?
Right. Okay. So the moderate center leftists are liberals, right? So they agree on the existence of the state. They agree on they agree that the Constitution of the United States is a good thing. and that the values represented in it do represent their core values. And then it's just about a question of effectively who has access to these things. But the problem with the socialists is that they effectively find all kinds of barriers to be problematic. The radical left is essentially concerned with removing structure. And that sounds counterintuitive when you realize they ask for big government, but they think it'll be okay because they'll be in charge of it. That's just their opinion on that. They would rather, honestly, I mean, like, you can go to any of them, go to anyone who calls themselves like a democratic socialist and ask them, do you think communism would be a nice idea? And they'll say, well, yeah, in theory, but it'll never work. It just won't happen. And so they have to work within the confines of the system they're in. But ideally, they would like a world where there were no structures or barriers. And the right is very much the opposite of this. The right values hierarchy and order. In fact, hierarchy is probably the word to use. The left is anti-hierarchy in principle, not necessarily in practice. The right is pro-hierarchy. And I'm a centrist, so I'm very much on Jordan Peterson's side with this one. There are definitely times where hierarchy is necessary, but hierarchy has to be justified. It can become tyrannical, and it's kind of the same with the opposite, though. There are times when it is justified to break down some barriers, because some barriers don't have justification. They just are inherited from ancient prejudices, and so you need to be able to knock those things down. But once you once you look into the radical left, you realize that they consider any kind of structure and order to be a form of oppression. I mean, and the way the transgenderism debate is happening around children is a great way of looking at this. The language they use is very telling. So they'll say something like, gender roles prevent the complete freedom of expression for children. And it's like, well, duh. Obviously, the whole point of a gender role is to define something as a thing, and then another thing as dichotomous with that initial proposition, and then have delineated barriers, as in boys wear blue, girls wear pink. I'm not saying these are necessarily good or bad, but if you're going to create gender roles and you need any kind of signifiers to establish that they are the thing that you're claiming them to be, yeah, that's going to restrict quote unquote expression. But I mean, do you want unlimited expression? As a father, I'm telling you, you don't want unlimited expression for your children, because then they'll start painting on your walls and things like this, So you could turn around and use the same phraseology against me just by being a parent who doesn't want my child to draw on the walls. I'm limiting the full range of expression from him. Yeah, I am. Yeah, because sometimes order is a good thing.
There's certain concepts that they can't understand. I mean, you can take, say, a 4-year-old and put 5 different cups together, and then you put them, you space them far apart, and then you take the same number of cups, space them farther apart, and you say, which one has more cups, and they'll point to the long one, even though the amount of cups are the same. But once you get to 8, they can tell you why. Oh, no, those cups are just spaced farther apart.
Yeah.
So if we're going to start teaching this gender stuff, how do we even know that they have the concept to be able to get this? To me, you have to teach the binary. When people are old enough, you can start teaching the exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, I think it's exceptionally dangerous to have children making decisions as if they're adults, especially ones with such far-reaching ramifications. I mean, I'm all for, I'm in very libertarian fashion. I'm all for an adult doing whatever they want to their body. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you want to commit suicide, that's your right. I can't stop you. It's your body, it's your property. You're the one who decides what happens to it. If you want to change yourself from one thing to another thing, good luck. I hope it works out for you, and I hope you're very happy. But when it comes to children who are, and the problem with the transgenderism debate is that it's so polarized, and deliberately so, obviously, by transgender activists, that you can't talk about the downsides, and there are significant downsides. And so you end up seeing this expressed in Reddit threads, where it's some person who's been through gender reassignment surgery, and they say, this was a mistake, I shouldn't have done this, now I'm feeling depressed and suicidal. And obviously suicide rates in the trans community are colossal. And it's one of those things where I think we can't just irresponsibly say, well, children know how they feel. It's no, they don't. I mean, like, one day my kid will come in, he's 3, and he'll come in and tell me he's a fire engine. He doesn't know about being male or female. He just knows that he's a kid, and I think it's really dangerous. But just to return to Cortez a second, the one of the things that I wanted to note is that the important thing with Cortez is she has got game, but that's and I say this as a troll because she is a troll as well, and it only works as long as your opponent bites the bait. If the Republicans didn't take the bait and I'm not saying don't talk about her. I'm saying don't act like she's a threat. Because, I mean, if you look at Ben Shapiro's delivery, he acts like he's got to destroy her entire worldview, and then, all right, yeah, destroy the facts and logic.
Yeah, but
the thing is, she doesn't care.
Yeah, I know she doesn't care, but he's making money off of it. I mean,
sure, of course.
It's helpful for him to have a Voldemort out there that he can fucking.
I don't think it is. I think it's I think it's one of those things that looks helpful on the surface, but instead ends up creating the seed of its own destruction.
But I
agree.
I don't see him saying he's afraid. I think he says this is crazy. He kind of laughs and he'll be like, "Oh my God, AOC!" Like,
he's using her. Every other article is about her. But I agree. Because her whole goal is to move the Overton window left. As much as she can drag the goddamn Democratic Party left, she's achieved her goal, even if she burns.
And it doesn't matter what Ben Shapiro says. Sure.
Well, it kind of does, right? Because Ben Shapiro is effectively kind of like, but Ben Shapiro is kind of like the Ocasio-Cortez of the right in many ways. The leftists hate him. They hate him. He diametrically opposes almost all of their sacred cows, and he's got
never mentioned
leftists, but not liberals.
No, I know. I'm not worried about liberals. Liberals are more moderate people, like they can be reasoned with. But the thing with the leftists, they look at Ben Shapiro in the same way, and so they're glad to have a weapon in Cortez to fight him with on this ground. And Shapiro acting like she is an existential threat to his belief system means that she becomes that thing in the minds of her supporters and people just onlooking. And so when he's every single day talking about her, and he's talking about her as if she is important, that legitimizes her. What they should do, I'm not saying
the only reason I'm doing it is because the Democrats are putting her out front and center, and I'm forced to talk about her. But he doesn't. He's not actually forced to talk about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, the Democrats, okay, Elizabeth Warren, she's the best example of this, right? She's a very high-profile Democrat. She gets a lot of media coverage, but she gets it for the wrong reasons, and it's always in the conservatives' favor. Like when she was like, "Here's my DNA test results," that was a great week for me. I had a great time. No one was looking at the conservatives and saying, "Oh, they're afraid of Elizabeth Warren. What if she turns out to be like 3% Native American?" No one cared. No, it wasn't a threat. It wasn't dangerous. It was a massive backfire for Elizabeth Warren. But Cortez is approaching this in a different angle, and the reason that she triggers these Republicans, and she does trigger them, because she doesn't agree with any of these sort of axiomatic beliefs upon which their worldview rests.
That's true.
And it's the same for the left when it comes to like someone like me, like a sort of like traditional liberal. I don't agree that we should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And so when I say no, I think feminism is illegitimate at its very core as being a method of social like engineering. Frankly, I don't think that we should engineer society. There can't be any real like discussion on what is good or bad within feminism, because I'm rejecting it as a paradigm. And Cortez is doing the same thing with Ben Shapiro's beliefs. I mean, she would, if possible, reject capitalism outright. That would be a nightmare scenario for Ben Shapiro. And so it's not that she's powerful, but Ben Shapiro is like looking at this and thinking, God, she represents a complete sea change in what I would like to see. And her influence, the fact that she's grown, is because conservatives look at her as an existential threat. And that's good for the far left activists because they want to support an existential threat to conservatism.
Well, I think it's not so much her as that those identity politics, the group assignment as opposed to individual liberty.
I don't know if it's group assignment. I mean, look at it historically. Is in the last presidential election, you had Clinton versus Bernie Sanders. Okay. Everyone focused on Clinton. No one focused on Bernie Sanders, right? some of the Republicans started to saying, hey, this guy is getting the short end of the stick. And by them focusing on him, that actually attracted attention from both sides to him. That allowed him to kind of, get higher in the polls, whatever. Now he's a dominant figure. Is anyone talking about Bernie Sanders? Fucking no one is. No. So now AOC is kind of the heir apparent.
But he's not intersectional enough. That's the thing.
Yeah.
He's definitely, you can't run Bernie Sanders.
Is that the reason?
Maybe you can run Beto O'Rourke. Maybe, but
you 100% could.
But I don't know. But against Kamala Harris, I don't know. The intersectional. I agree with Sargon that the intersectional part of that is going to have to be a big deal. Like if Beto will have to have a black woman or as a VP, so you would have to.
Sargon, this is where you'll have to weigh in because I disagree that that's what he's saying. I think whoever the Republicans choose as the primary target will end up being the person in the limelight who will have the best chances. So if the Republicans focus on Beto O'Rourke, that's the fucking guy. That's the guy you need to watch out for. Well, whoever they target.
It really depends on who the person is, right? Because the magic of Cortez is that she freaks the Republicans out. Because I mean, she's effectively a Chavez, she's a radical socialist. I mean, like what was the federal jobs guarantee that anyone unemployed can work for the government for $15 an hour or something like that? I mean, like you laugh, but like the conservatives should have been all over this. I saw so little in the way of conservatives pointing out that this is blatant socialism, as in what's going to happen. Anyone earning less than $15 an hour is going to be employed by the government, and so now the government is going to have to set up work offices, places where these people can actually work for $15 an hour. So what's that mean? Okay, you work in a fast food restaurant or something? Okay, well the government's going to have to set up a fast food restaurant. Now you're looking at state-owned businesses that's all been done through the back door. It's raw socialism, and it's going to destroy the economy, obviously, as he's going to expect the billionaires to pay for all of this, which is not going to happen. And so it's like, it's unbelievable that this like kind of flew under the radar of conservatives. I guess because it was such a ridiculous proposition, but like
that's what I think they're seeing, because she's so different. But then you have like Joe Lieberman saying, no, AOC is not the future of the party. Like
she is the future of the party. She's absolutely the future of them.
I think that is the worry that idea, and it may not be AOC herself, but there are others. I mean, I think she's the one that's got the most savvy right now.
Yeah, she's media sensible. Like, okay, so Cortez is very clearly a disciple of Alinsky, and I say this as a disciple of Alinsky. It's very easy to.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, he's the Rules for Radicals guy, in case anyone.
Yes, everyone should read Rules for Radicals, regardless of political affiliation, because it's not a partisan manual. It's a manual of tactics. It's like the art of war for politics, right? Anyone can use it, and the Republicans definitely should, especially given the sort of power of the Democratic establishment. They don't hold the presidency or even that much influence in government, but it's social power that the Democrats wield, and it's really, really strong. I mean, we saw this with the MAGA kids and the Native American man. Just the fury of this establishment is palpable. But the thing with Cortez is that she doesn't accept any of their propositions, any of their original axioms. Like, she doesn't agree. And there's no way of them being able to convince her, because her entire framework is opposite to what the Republicans want. And so essentially, when the Democratic Party shifts radically to the left, as it is doing so right now, and it's a concerted effort as well, it's like the activists are well aware that that's what they're doing, and Cortez is like, new party, who dis sort of thing. It's like she knows she's doing exactly that, so don't. She has this kind of doe-eyed routine, but she's very aware. I mean, like there are interviews or like, little meetings where she's talking to like groups of feminists and stuff, and she will just be cold as ice when she is just like, no, you have to do this, you have to do that. She's a very sensible and clever tactician. But when she's in the CNN interview, she's like, oh, well, maybe if we can just, very, very girly, and she's, very, very clever tactician in this way, right? She's not clever with facts and statistics, but that doesn't matter. Right. That's not what her audience is going to her for. But basically, she's essentially going to foment a civil war in your country, I think.
Well,
I think the Civil War,
but she's not relevant for 2020 at the least,
Right.
unless she ends up throwing her support behind some asshole.
Her endorsement will be very powerful.
Yeah. So the question is that here's the maybe someone's asked you on a different podcast, and it's what do we got? January 23rd, 2019. This is Sargon of Akkad's official prediction as of the like 6 people that have come into the. It said that they're doing exploratory fucking commissions.
He's putting you on the spot.
Who are you eyeballing right now? Who's hot? Who's sexy on the DNC side for 2020?
None of them really.
But if you have,
you got
no, and I don't. Okay, so
make your bet.
No. I don't.
Man, I'll tell you who I'm excited about.
Okay, so I mean, personally, on a personal level, I love Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah,
I love Tulsi, right? Because ultimately, like, and it's probably not going to be popular for me to say this, but she's kind of a Bannonite.
Give me credit for giving you that idea. Come on.
No. I've been following Tulsi for years, man. I've been following Tulsi for years because I like when I considered myself like a left winger. She was one of the left wingers I was totally into. I thought she was great, and I still do think she's great. I think it's a problem she's trapped in the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party is becoming totally different. Like before, it was like a center-left liberal party, and it was a liberal party, but now it's become a very far-left progressive party, and that's completely different dichotomy. But Tulsi Gabbard's going to get savaged. I mean, I guess you've already seen her getting savaged in the media. Unjustly, totally unjustly. Like her story, of a person who was raised in a gay rights, an anti-gay rights activist household, a conservative, theological household, for her to end up like growing up out of those beliefs and using reason, actually interrogating her own thought processes, and then coming to the conclusion that actually this is terrible. Of course, gay people should be able to marry and such, and so for her to come out of that and become a liberal it should be a success story that the DNC and the Democrats should embrace wholeheartedly, because she's a woman of color. She's been on like the other side and she's seen the light, as it were, and she's come into the fold, and now she's a stolid, reliable, she's very sensible. She's very, very sensible. Tulsi Gabbard is the sort of person who will play very well with married, middle-aged people, in my opinion. She's very polished in that way, but she's not like some corporate shill, which is incredibly rare, frankly. And honestly, I think she's effectively going to start following Bannon's agenda. I realize that in America, Steve Bannon, in fact, everywhere, Steve Bannon is kind of like the Prince of Darkness or something. Yes. But he's really not. She constantly puts herself as being essentially America first. Yes. And she's not an interventionist. She wants to pull people out of the Middle East. She's very liberal on social issues, which I think is great. She is effectively a Bannonite, and so I would love to see Tulsi do quite well, but it's not going to happen because the progressive forces within the Democratic Party is just going to scupper.
I think that's true. I think that it's not AOC herself that the Civil War. It's the idea of the identity politics that so much that you can that you have to attribute so much meaning to race, right? This was the whole idea with the Covington kids was, how dare they? This is a Native American, right? This is a person that's very, very high on the progressive stack. It right away they do this. Now it could have been framed. It was sometimes framed as sexism, right? That this was, boys getting out, and this is the face of the patriarchy. But it's weird to me that, okay, yes, that you have the progressive stack there, but then when it's talking about Candace Owens, they have no problem throwing Candace Owens under the bus. She's a black woman. She's high in the intersectional landmark. So it's only intersectional people that fit the narrative get the defense. And
absolutely,
that's what it's that inconsistency that people will start really retreating back into the tribe. Who can I trust?
She is intersectional. Yeah. She's Samoan. You want to throw?
No. You've got to be ideologically intersectional.
Yeah, you have to.
You can't just being. She'll be an Uncle Tom or some variant of when it comes to it. Because you would think like a woman of color, Tulsi Gabbard. A woman of color who has served in the military, who's been a congressperson for since 2013, something like that, and has. I personally consider her record to be spotless, but then I'm not a rabid opponent of hers, so I would just look at it and say, well, there's nothing that she's done wrong there. You know, she went and talked to Assad. So what? You know,
I mean,
that's the other big thing that she gets hit on. I don't know if you guys saw the Joe Rogan interview with Barry Weiss.
I haven't seen that one. I watched Tulsi's one with him. Though.
That was the last one. So he talked to this New York Times reporter. Fucking brilliant. Everything she said in that interview was great. Her position on Israel, like her denouncing of these left-wing fake news tactics, everything is great.
And Barry Weiss is great, yeah.
But then Joe Rogan mentions Tulsi Gabbard as a candidate, and Barry Weiss goes off about how she's terrible, how she's the worst thing that's happened to the Democratic Party, how she's an Assad sycophant, how she's anti-gay, and I'm like, bitch, what is happening? What the fuck? You're great on all these things, but now you're a left-wing, goddamn radical when it comes to denouncing someone who's an actual centrist and is not a progressive nutcase. What if that is, and that's one of the most reasonable leftist people I've ever heard, Barry Weiss. Yeah. And if she has those stances against Tulsi Gabbard, shit, she doesn't have a snowflake chance in hell.
No, Tulsi's going to get chewed out by the establishment because ultimately she's not really part of it. She's been critical of the DNC. She's been critical of Hillary and everyone.
She's the first supporter for Bernie Sanders. She was one of the only superdelegates that supported him.
Yep, she is an outsider in the DNC. She honestly she reminds me of politics like 20 or 30 years ago. You know, she like Tulsi Gabbard feels out of her time. Like she actually is a left winger who's proud of having served in the military, for example.
Yeah. Well, I mean, still has that's the last remaining thing I think that the left and right actually both have esteem for is the military.
Is she like Ross Perot with smaller ears, maybe?
I wouldn't say the left really have esteem for the military at this point. I think
they can't attack the military. I mean, they even used it with
they do, but they attack them indirectly. They use the term "quote unquote" America when they are talking about America's military. Like you get Kyle Kalinske saying, "Well, the Noam Chomsky going with the U.S. is the biggest, the biggest source of violence in the world," and it's like, okay, well, it's the hegemon of the world. What do you expect?
But I mean, I do mean the liberal left. Like they still very much they consider themselves patriots. The far left, I would agree.
And that's where Tulsi Gabbard fits neatly into what like we would agree on is a good thing. But this is where the far left disagree completely because they don't like the idea of military interventions, even if it was a necessary thing. You know, I mean, like again, I use the example of Kyle Kalinske, who I think used to be in the sort of liberal left, but has gone quite far to the left at this point. And his opinion was, and it was
still refusing to debate you on anything.
Yeah, he won't debate me anymore. It's a real shame. I used to really like Kyle, and like we'd have really productive conversations. But there's kind of a sort of cultish tribal mentality around the left at the moment, and even those people on the sort of like more moderate fringes are now being sucked into it. And we saw that with like Ben Shapiro and Bill Maher. Where Ben Shapiro, when Bill Maher was like, "You're an always Trumper," and Ben was like, "No, I'm not," But that's because Bill Maher's an always Democrat,
Yeah, they had a really good talk, but then has there been a fallout lately or something? It is a little weird.
Yeah. But the thing, like a lot of the radical left think with intervention is, it has to be like 100% justifiable, and it's like, well, I don't think there is a war that is 100% justifiable before the end of the war. Like a lot of things come out in hindsight that aren't really not known directly before the war happens. And I mean, I guess you've got to go to the Nazis to say, well, this is 100% justifiable.
Was individual military members tend to get respect for that. It's not what the president or the foreign policy leaders do with the military, but the military itself seems to be a respectable institution. But what do you think? I wanted to segue. What happened with this serious, like a media irresponsibility implosion with this Covington kids thing? I mean, is it a complete irresponsibility of the media, or is it just there is this ether in the air of like that white male smirking, or this white male privilege? Was this an attack against a perceived boogeyman of white male privilege?
It was exactly the same thing that the conservatives have with Cortez. They don't like her face because she's smirking at them and saying, I don't respect anything you believe. And what they perceived with a young man, white, wearing a MAGA hat, smirking at a Native American man, and refusing to move out of his way as well. Not that he had an obligation to move, but in the progressive mind, he certainly did. They perceived it very quickly as a rejection of their value system, wholesale.
Yeah, a mockery of it too, because
exactly. I mean, like it would be like an Islamist chopping off like Sean's head and then holding it up and smirking at you, going, "See, I did this for Allah, and I'm the one who's morally right." You would be horrified. Well, maybe not that horrified with Sean's, but the thing is, you'd be horrified, and that's the way that they took this kid's smirk. They were like, "Oh my God. He doesn't believe in feminism. He doesn't believe in women's rights. This kid is the patriarchy personified."
I mean, but it'd be one thing if like he got up there and said all that, but to get so much from a smirk, and then did you see the meme going around that the George Orwell, that they even passed face law, that the
face crime,
face crime. So to me, this is the media really have to look. Do you think they will? And because a lot of them have apologized, others are doubling down, like Reza Aslan, which I think just write him off as any kind of a reasonable person. After
Brian,
this.
I wanted to mark myself safe from white kids smirking.
Oh my God,
on Facebook.
Yeah, I mean to go after kids like it. Yeah. I couldn't believe it, and it was just rage. And I think so many of these people they detest privilege more than they actually want to raise the downtrodden.
Oh, of course. I mean, that incidentally was something Orwell noted when he was spending a lot of time in socialist circles, that it's not that socialists care about the poor, it's that they really hate the rich. And it's socialism has always been driven by resentment. And that's the problem with socialism. Obviously it doesn't even work. It doesn't work as an economic system, right? But it's really not an economic system, in my opinion. In my opinion, it's a moral philosophy that's dressed up in the language of economics. And so it's like, okay, well, you don't actually need to talk about economic questions because that's categoric. The question is answered. What's better, socialism or capitalism? Well, from an economic perspective, obviously capitalism. That's demonstrable by the metrics. We can produce any number from any country that's chosen one or the other, and you can see the benefits of each system or the downsides of each system. But that's not the question they're asking you. The question they're asking you is, how much inequality is acceptable? And is it morally justified to reduce everyone to the same level? And they use the term equality all the time. That's one of the things that the Marxists used to do at the turn of the 20th century is, instead of talking about inequality, because that was kind of a given, they would talk about poverty. But the problem is capitalism has solved the poverty problem. Now our poor people are fat and they have iPhones, so you can't exactly sit there going, "Oh, you guys need your daily bread." Dude, they need to lay off their daily bread at this point. They need to stop eating canned hot dogs and things like this.
Please put that on a shirt, by the way. Lay off your daily bread.
Yeah, basically, lay off your daily Big Mac. You know what I mean? And that's not the problem anymore. So effectively, in the 50s and 60s, the communists or the socialists realized that this isn't going to work. They're not going to gain ground doing that. So they had to change tack to now focus on equality. And that's a massive can of worms. Just the question of equality. Is it because when people think equality, there are so many different ways of framing it. Like a liberal thinks political equality, one man, one vote. That's what a liberal thinks. But that's obviously not what the socialists are going for, because otherwise,
the law.
If the socialists were going for that, they'd have no complaints whatsoever, because that's the system we live in. Now they're talking about material equality, and it's like, okay, well, is that moral? Is it moral for you to give people things they didn't earn? Is it moral for you to take away from people other things because someone else doesn't have enough? And at what point do we stop? At what point do you say, right, okay, this is good enough? And this, like, for example, everyone uses the phrase equality of opportunity. And what they mean by that is they don't want artificial barriers placed on individuals moving through systems, right? And like, for example, like restricting people on race and gender, right? There's nothing tangible about those barriers. They're based on prejudices, so they should be removed in order to make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity because of their innate characteristics to progress through these institutions. And that sounds sensible and sane and compact, enclosed in its own logic.
Get into an interesting game here if you, because I've had someone use this argument against me is equality of opportunity, right? We think we all across the board agree on that. What about a kid that's born in a ghetto?
Yeah, you're actually arguing for communism.
Well, and that's the whole point is how do you bring that kid up to the same opportunities that we had, who had a mom and a dad and fucking no drugs.
Exactly. You create a mandate to restructure all of society now, because if you can point to any one person who is, grows up in impoverished circumstances, you can easily make the case that they don't have the opportunities that someone else has. And that's not what you're trying to do. Is you're not trying to restructure all of society by saying, I don't want people to be held back based on innate characteristics. And so we need a better way of phrasing it. I think that the way that I would describe it, the liberal position on this, like my liberal position on this, I would really like to move away from using the term equality. I think it's just wrong. I think there is no such thing. It's a dream. It always has been, and it will always cause trouble, right? That's not what we're aiming for. I don't think it's morally justified to make people materially equal. I don't think it's possible. I think it's going to end in tears and deaths every time. I always conceived of liberalism as being like the peerage of mankind, like the political rights of people. It's not about, and I don't want the government to have a particular position on my economic situation. I don't want the government to be, because this was the problem with fascism, man. This is like the Giovanni Gentili, the fascist philosopher, the one, basically he described the fascist state as being an ethical state, as in the state itself has a moral goal for the society over which it rules and it encompasses entirely. And it's very similar with the socialists. Very similar. They have a moral goal. It's not about, protecting your rights, which is what the liberal state does, and making sure that you're free. It's about making sure that you conform to that ideological perspective. You are equal, you are socialist, you are intersectional, you are fascist, whatever it is. And from this point of view, like the liberal state is the opposite of the fascist and socialist state. And I'm at the point where it's like he described it as essentially being woke as well. He was like, the fascist state is wide awake and has a will of its own. You may as well call it woke. And that's what these people are, and these sort of social engineers who want to use state power to change society in their own image. It all comes down to they want to be able to reorder the material circumstances of society, and us saying we want equality of opportunity plays right into that.
If we don't talk about equality and we talk about liberalism, here's another monkey wrench at you. Let me see how you dodge it.
I'll try and take it on, man. I'm not gonna dodge it.
Take it square in the chin, man. Here's something I've also heard as a counter argument to this is that we live in a society as liberal as it could possibly be. Imagine Rucka Rucka's fucking Ayn Randian utopia. Okay. The system is structured in such a way that you're born into it and you have to have a job. It's an oligopoly of sorts. And that you have to run in the rat race. Like you're in the game. You can't get out of it. And thus it inherently becomes unliberal at that point because you don't have the freedom to just hang out in the woods and I guess you could and eat berries, but someone owns the woods. So, really you got to pay someone. You know what I mean? Like you.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. As in, so.
Liberalism is a pipe dream because it doesn't exist unless you're somewhere in the fucking Amazon where there is no.
Well, I don't agree that's what liberalism is. I don't think that liberalism is anarchy, and the anarchists wouldn't agree that it was.
But maybe the liberalism has just a smaller moral piece. But I think the protection of individual liberty, to me, that seems like a moral good. Like
it absolutely is a moral good, but it's not telling you how to be good. It's not telling you. I mean, like to say that the state is here to protect your rights is to say the state is here to protect innate characteristics about you. These rights are natural, they're within you, and it requires an outside force to deprive you of them. And the state is here to prevent outside forces from depriving you of your rights. And that doesn't have a moral impetus on you as in any further than preventing you from harming other people. That's all. It's inhibitory. It stops you from doing bad things to other people, but it doesn't force you to do good things. It doesn't force you, or what it considers to be good things. It doesn't force you. It doesn't compel you to make certain choices and believe certain things that you otherwise might not be inclined to do.
There's still a meta moral of that if we organize our society that way, better things will happen. So,
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that there is a moral there. I just don't think that they're
it's a moral good in and of itself, and I think it's the most freedom we can reasonably expect living in an imperfect world. I don't think that any of these other ideas actually produce freedom or freedom to any degree that we would recognize it as being. I think it ends up going the other way and becomes constrictive in different ways. But I mean, the thing is, it is important. Like this, I'll probably do a video on this fairly soon, because this is something I've been thinking. It's like, what does liberalism need to synthesize from its other core components, like the descendant ideologies from it? Because like liberalism is effectively it came together in England through a big strain of different social forces that all sort of got intertwined together. Is it, for example, can anyone explain why liberalism is pro-capitalism?
No, that uninhibited markets, I would suppose. If you would have like the freedom of liberty yourself, you have the freedom of liberty to engage in transactions with others at your own will.
Exactly. It's just, it seems to be the right fit, as in nobody's compelling you. Therefore, this must be liberalism's goal. But if a better economic system than capitalism came along that was more voluntary, I can't conceive of what it is. Obviously, I don't know what it is. But if something was innovated tomorrow that happened to be more suited to sort of like the liberal teleology, then there's no reason that liberals wouldn't just dump capitalism like that. They wouldn't care. Why would they care? As long as they're looking for an end goal.
That's the balance, really, of two forces. I mean, there are anarchists out there, and they think that that's the best possible system. But it doesn't work because we're violent creatures. We need some sort of a structure in order to all organize. So for society, capitalism seems to be the best. That's actually, I think, the best defense to this question of, is liberalism inherently oppressive because you're forced to conform to a system where you have to go get a job and you have to pay rent and all this other shit?
That's no different saying that existence is oppressive, because even if you were like alone in the woods, you'd effectively have to get a job of finding your own food, setting up traps, learning to hunt, making a shelter, cooking food, making fire. Existence itself requires a certain amount of effort, is essentially the point there. And that's inevitable. I mean, like Lenin was like, he who does not work does not eat. And it's like, well, that's not very socialist, is it? But you can't exactly accuse Lenin of not being a socialist. So, it's just an inevitable consequence of us being material beings, I think. But I think that liberalism is definitely the best one. But I was thinking about this.
Like, I think they've adopted like the intersectionality is the moral portion of this, because I agree that is hard to, you don't really have a moral stance, and sometimes people want that. And with the decline of religion, with the decline of religion, like I think that the liberal left is adopting intersectionality as it's kind of an ideology that makes them feel good that they're not the same. They're giving up religion for this.
Exactly.
That's undoubtedly, and you can see this in Cortez's defenders, like her acolytes. They really are just, like the evangelicals. He makes me feel so good, and there is definitely an aspect to this.
Yeah,
and in fact, it probably is innate in humans. Yeah.
So much so that the Universalist Unitarian Church here, which is kind of like the place where you could sort of believe anything. There was a lot of atheists there and stuff. But they're now adopting, like they said before, it's kind of like there's no faith, centralized, believe what you want, but they're moving for a theology of racial justice. They literally say it straight up, theology of racial justice. But I think that's what intersectionality already is. It just doesn't go by that name.
Do they pray
to
a giant Gillette razor? Is that the thing that's at the...
Well, I mean, social justice is a Catholic concept. So it was originally invented in the 19th century by the Catholic Church, and then it was adopted by the socialists, I suppose. But I don't think that there is such a thing. I've come to the conclusion that Hayek came to after he spent like 20 years just trying to even define social justice. I think that justice is an individual concept. I don't think you can have a group justice.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible.
No, so here, take this with like social justice and the Gillette commercial. So some people raise the big alarm on this and say, wow, companies are adopting ideological principles. Like as soon as we have like a left-wing Walmart and a right-wing Walmart, like that, this is really bad. Or it could be that they're looking millennials like socially conscious capitalism. They think this is in vogue, and then they go with toxic masculinity.
Or opportunism, like Sargon of Akkad, brought to you by Dollar Shave Club. Boom. Look at it.
I've never taken a call.
I mean, they are losing market share. Maybe this is the way.
Don't sully my name with that, honestly.
What's your take on Gillette?
Okay, so I mean, personally, the last thing I want is for a razor manufacturer to try and give me moral instruction. I don't respect Gillette as a moral authority. I'm not interested in their opinion in what right and wrong is. I consider them an authority on how to shave my face, and I have a beard, so I don't care about their opinions about anything. So don't sit there and preach to me, Gillette, as if you know more than I do about anything, because I just don't care about your opinions.
I bet you trim it, you son of a bitch.
But what would they say? Well, like, what do you say for like when I talk to a lot of liberals will just say, "Oh, come on, man, that commercial, like that is not offensive. It's just saying don't be a douche."
Well, I mean, it's nothing but feminist propaganda. It begins with the Me Too movement and toxic masculinity. First 6 seconds of the commercial, that's what we hear. And then we're seeing effectively a pathologization of male behavior. The boys will be boys. Yeah, boys will be boys. And that means boys will roughhouse. Boys will play fight with one another. And there's an unbelievable amount of psychology material that shows that this is a totally natural thing for boys, which is what every man knows, because they all fought with their friends when they were kids as well, but the problem is that women who don't really understand men, like one of the studies that I cited in the video I did about this is women who grew up in a house without any brothers couldn't identify when boys were play fighting. They assumed that boys fighting was just bad. It was they were trying to hurt each other. They weren't just play fighting. But the women who'd grown up in households with brothers totally understood what was going on, and it wasn't an issue for them. And so this whole thing seems to stem from a lack of understanding of male behavior, frankly.
Well, it's interesting. And there's some like guys, like I used to fight with my brothers all the time, and I think, man, I got my ass kicked for the most part because I'm the youngest, and like I was that part of my social development, like yes. I guess like I didn't realize that getting picked on and just wrestling around and always losing was actually probably valuable. Like
right. The interesting thing is when there's some reports that came out when they tested this commercial with focus groups or what have you. When they just showed the beginning of the commercial, there was way more outrage than when they showed the whole thing. So there are a lot of people who started watching it were like, fuck this noise, and they turned it off because it's preachy as hell at the beginning. Yeah. And so no matter how you slice it, even left-wing outlets were saying that this is a bad move for Gillette. And obviously Q2 of this year we'll be able to tell how their profits are going. But because Nike didn't suffer at all. In fact, they had a boost from the Colin Kaepernick advertisement, but it was markedly different. It was very much iconic. It was focused on one person, and it was
on brand. And they technically don't say whether or not they don't say whether Kaepernick what he's doing is good. Just he was willing to risk it.
It just said take a stand. Right. That's it. Here they're going, you're a fucking this.
Well, yeah, that's the thing as well. Like Nike's one wasn't attacking white people or something, or attacking cops, or something like that. Nike was supporting someone trying to achieve something positive. Whether I agree with it or not, at least I can be charitable and say that's how he interprets it. Colin Kaepernick interprets it. But the Gillette one, I mean, like they were trying to tie masculinity to Harvey Weinstein, as in the boys boys roughhousing is why Harvey Weinstein was a predator. It's like, no, that's obviously wildly inaccurate. That's like me saying all Muslims are terrorists.
They were doing that, but they had a.
Oh, they certainly were.
They weren't tying those two distinct. They were saying toxic masculinity is this breadbasket of bad ideas, and it includes 1, 2, 3, these 7 things. Right? It wasn't saying.
I don't think they were being that clear.
But there was a
7.
There was a suggestion of what that one guy when he's like, "Oh, hot woman, got to go talk to her," and the other guy's like, "Not cool, not cool."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but that had nothing to do with the other aspect. Listen, we can all agree that it was a shit commercial. I'm just saying the roughhousing had to do with don't bully. It was saying toxic masculinity is made out of all these ingredients. It didn't say.
I don't know. I think it's more than that. I think that the fact that they started with Me Too and continued the Me Too theme throughout the whole thing, including Terry Crews, who was a Me Too victim of a Hollywood executive. Because, effectively, Me Too is a very elitist and Democrat, and in certain very specific industries, this kind of phenomena, the sort of casting couch phenomena, is what Me Too is really, was really about. Before feminists tried to weaponize it against everyone everywhere, every man everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't bear much relation to the average person's life, the average man's life, But the thing is, this was a consistent theme throughout the entire video. The Me Too, was a thing throughout. Men must hold one another accountable. It's like, well, we do. We've got a whole legal system.
This whole kind of gumption that's going to get you to stand up to another guy's like, if you don't create that, then you don't have men to stop the other guys to do this.
Well, and there is that. I would love for a bunch of soy boys to come up to me and start addressing me about things. I'll be terrified.
It just seems weird. And I thought too that they were going, into the past, like there's like some weird scenes where people are grabbing women's asses. And I thought, okay, this isn't even if you go back in time, the masculine ideal wasn't you just take what you want from a woman. Like, to me, none of these tropes, these stereotypes represented a masculine ideal, past or present.
But Brian,
absolutely. I mean, what they're describing as a villain.
Yeah, and then the masculine ideal was to go get that guy.
Yeah, you're the hero. You're meant to defeat the villain.
Take a devil's advocate approach with you fuckers, since someone needs to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or else we're all shitlords, right?
Mm-hmm.
Take this masculinity argument and juxtapose it with the whole police brutality thing and the incestuous nature of police departments as they're seen in the United States. So you're a bad cop, you do whatever the fuck, you beat on a black guy, and all of a sudden all of your buddies, they may think that it's wrong, but the cult of police brotherhood is so strong that they will defend this motherfucker and they'll keep the bad apples here.
Yeah.
Where I see that this toxic masculinity, whatever the hell that they're trying to do, is they're trying to prevent the same thing. They're trying to say, listen, we all know that rape and all of the and inappropriately touching a woman is wrong, but if we see a buddy or someone doing it, we may let it slide because bros before hoes. And at the best possible light is what they're trying to do is shine a negative light on that and say, listen, if you do see someone slapping someone's ass, you better say something about it. If that's the case, I can see how that could be a net positive of sorts, but it is definitely out of control where it's gone to now.
That is the most charitable interpretation.
Yes.
But I think a more accurate interpretation would be the use of the police force is a good one, actually. Like corrupt cops get protected by a corrupt establishment.
It's totally my idea.
No. But the thing is, that was what was happening in Hollywood. It was Harvey Weinstein's. The sort of person who will exploit women in this way for their own benefit, and it's an open secret. Everyone knows, but it's very in-house. It's very confined. But you can't just pathologize men with that, because men aren't like that. Men don't just one of the I'm friends with a journalist called Tim Pool, and he was telling me that his sort of like wake up moment for what's happening with the radical left is when, a bunch of his left-wing friends, one of his female left-wing friends, a feminist obviously, sat down with him and said, so how many of your friends think that it's okay to rape then? Just give me a ballpark number. And he was just like, 0.
Right.
And she's like, no, come on, really, how many, and she was expecting like maybe 3 or 4 of his friends would be like, yeah, I'd rape someone.
No, but that's an extreme argument.
I know. I'm giving you an extreme example, but it's
under the misapprehension.
No, I'm saying that the zeitgeist changes. Like today, I watched a stand-up special. It's very recent from this year, where a guy gets introduced, a comedian gets introduced by a chick comedian, okay? And once she leaves the stage, the first thing he says when he comes up to the microphone is, he's like, thank you, whatever the fuck your name is. He's like, so I'd hit that. And then he does 30 seconds on that.
Right.
And there was a little bit of a cringe. 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought to cringe about that. Now, does this mean that now I'm subject to the whims of the toxic masculinity movement of Me Too? Or is this the right, like, what's the right reaction here? Or is this good that I'm going, I don't know about that joke. You could have done something better, buddy.
Well, I mean, I personally find that kind of crass.
See,
I find that,
and I would make the argument that it's because Me Too has fucking crept into your brain.
No, I would have found this crass anytime. I find that kind of undignified. Okay. That kind of like chasing after women sort of thing. I find that kind of undignified. And so I find it kind of cringy when men do it, and the excessive effort, because I think women are attracted to men who build things, and men who are chasing after women all the time, they're not building anything. And so they've got to effectively lie about what they are, and try and hype themselves up. Whereas if you're out there actually doing something, putting something together, making something of yourself, that will attract women who see that in process. They'll find that attractive and come to you. I think that's what men need to do.
I hit that thing, like, depending on delivery, that could be funny, because when you're saying that
it wasn't funny.
I would take her, it implies if she were willing, right?
Sure.
It absolutely does, because there's another woman that you're like, no, I don't find her attractive, but you're not thinking about, like, it's if she is willing.
But there's a difference, because she is still in the room. She walked off stage, and women are constantly, and listen, I'm not like Me Too justifying here. I'm saying I'm a little now,
I'd have to say,
and I'm not saying that the Me Too movement has been a net good. What I'm saying is that overall, the conversation around like how women are impacted by what men say and do around them is now getting people to go, fuck, if I was a chick and I just walked off stage and someone was like, I'd grab his dick, how would I feel? Because now I'm being talked to about.
Oh, did you see that in the Women's March where that one girl did grab the guy's dick?
Oh yeah,
no, that was kind of
totally unrepentant, like she did nothing wrong. But going back to Dimitri's point, I'm actually completely with you on this one, Dimitri. I think it's lowbrow, it's crass, and it is inappropriate. But the thing is, if you're in a comedy club, like you could make that joke and make it about. Make it a self-deprecating joke, as in that you were the butt of the joke. Sure. That you would say that, like Al Bundy style. You'd make yourself the joke doing that, and so it wouldn't be a way of like demeaning her or objectifying her. It would be a way of effectively, self-humiliation for the benefit of others. But it's not something that I think people should be castigated for. It's not like, okay, imagine he says it, like you say, Brian. It's not a threat to rape someone or anything like that. Obviously, no one sensible would interpret it like that. But it is kind of crass and lowbrow, and I think it's. I mean, I would find it kind of cringy, to be honest.
Yeah.
But not because of feminism.
There's actually this is funny because roaming millennials in the chat, hi roaming, she just actually made a really good point. She said crass humor has always been looked down on when it's gross towards women. We don't need Me Too for that, and that's literally
that's a great point. That's a really great point.
You guys are on the money. Listen, Carl, we know it's like 1:30 wherever you are.
It is, yeah,
in your non-free country.
It's not a free country, no.
It's not. So, hey, we only had one last thing on the docket. We don't need to really drag it out. We just wanted to talk about these acid attacks that are happening in your neck of the woods that maybe people don't know about. So let's just touch on that before we wrap things up.
Okay, yeah, there's a spate of acid attacks across Europe. It's not good. Often these are honor attacks, but not always. A lot of the time, I mean, it's like like between gangs that these things happen, as well as stabbings. So some of them seem to be religiously motivated. Others seem to be just kind of individual beefs and hatreds with particular individuals. Others are like there was recently, well, not recently, this happened last year, but the court case finished and the perpetrators were sentenced to what I think the ringleader was 17 years in jail for there was an attack on a gay nightclub. And these Turkish men, like 8 Turkish men, were beating people up, and one of them chucked acid in another guy's face during this attack. Obviously, a homophobic attack, and no questioning. I would suggest it probably comes from religious values. That, to be honest, but the gang one probably like gang acid attacks, presumably out of convenience. It's you can buy acid from wherever, some pharmacy or something, I presume. I don't know. I've never bought acid, actually. But I presume that you can make it without too much difficulty.
Basement.
Sorry?
Couldn't you crack open a battery?
No, I'm pretty sure you make it in your fucking bathroom.
Yeah, I'm assuming there's some kind of plastic tub that you make it in or something. I don't know. I've never done it. But like it's something you can make with home chemicals, and so there are definitely people who do it for religious reasons and chucking acid in a Muslim woman's face for not covering up and things like that. But there are also like inner city gangs that do it because it's a convenient way of hurting the enemy.
But it's just impossible to police this. Just like when you have problems with knife attacks, like what the fuck are you going to do? Track everyone whoever buys a kitchen knife?
Yeah.
Yes, that is actually what our government is going to do. They have knife amnesties. They've banned, they call them zombie knives, like elaborate looking decorative knives, but they're never sharp. You'd have to manually sharpen the thing, and you would never make a knife like that for any kind of combat or something because it'd be wildly impractical. But apparently, some gangs had got these because they look cool and then stab one another with them. And so now they're outlawed in this country. You can't carry those. And like regularly on social media, local police forces will say, right, we conducted a weapons sweep in, this area of our town. And we found this butter knife on a windowsill or something like that. And it's just like, I mean, there was a guy who was convicted of carrying a potato peeler, and that was considered a weapon because a potato peeler has an edge on it. And it's just like, man, my country isn't a serious country anymore.
It's not, man. I feel bad for you. You guys got the Brexit thing going for you, which is nice, but it's just, it doesn't make you feel good, especially if you're left leaning. Like maybe I would kind of quantify myself with like marijuana and medicine and things like that. But then shit, man. I mean, this, like the fact that you're going to get people regulating you out the ass, trying to track butter knife purchases, doing whatever. You can't police behavior, you fucking morons. All you can do is try and be a social good and try and, empower the Kobe Bryants of the world to be a moral figurehead and try and get people not to stab people in the face or throw acid at people. Listen, you can laugh at my examples all you want.
That was the most random.
Yes, it was a great random example. I will take full credit. Next time the Thinkery mentions Kobe Bryant, I'm going to take full credit for that.
I don't even know who he is, I'm afraid.
Whatever.
He's a basketball player,
he's a
right?
Basketball player. It doesn't matter. Fill in.
The thing is, there's no policing this because these people know they're doing wrong. They know that it's wrong to hurt people. They know all of this. They're doing it because they think they'll get away with it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like people that actually are going to rape somebody will not be convinced by the Gillette ad. So I agree. But now we're all under a culture war. How can people support you? We know that you're not on Patreon, so
I am on Subscribestar, and Subscribestar have recently got past their Silicon Valley deplatforming and are now taking payment processes. So if people wanted to support me, I think they're rolling it out, and I think I'm actually last on the list because I'm one of the biggest accounts on the site. But everyone else has got theirs, and I'm sure that mine will come in due process.
Okay, good. And I heard with Subscribestar, there's one extra step. So if you want to support, say, Sargon and then somebody else on Subscribestar, you will have to enter your stuff in twice. I don't think that's that big of a deal, considering you can move away from the social justice commissars at Patreon.
Yes.
So that's worth the extra step, I think.
Well, I think commissars is a great term for them as well, because they're not acting by their own rules. Their own rules don't really matter now it's quite capricious, and so it's like, okay, well, there we go then.
Like the commissars that were put in with the army, they're give the party line to the general who's supposed to have it. So I That's why I picked it. But so subscribe, Star. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Sargon, if you want to pitch anything else, I know you got this UKIP thing that you're doing.
Oh no, it's all right. I don't need to. I won't pitch anything. It's fine.
Check on his YouTube. Hit him up. Subscribe, Star. We're sorry that happened to you on Patreon, but
it's okay. It's probably my fault, to be honest. I didn't think it would ever. Why would I think that would be something? But apparently, there we go.
Yeah, but it made big news. So
hit up Sargon on Twitter because he's back on that bitch. Thank you.
It's not me. It's definitely a fake account.
I don't know. I've never seen him.
It's got not Sargon in the name. You know.
Yeah, I don't know. There's not Sargon.
Don't ban me, Jack. Don't ban me.
Appreciate you guys joining. Thanks, everyone. Take care.